get myself a rolling. Oh, this is just so much fun. So much fun. All right, I think we've got everybody on the line now. So this is wonderful. I welcome you today to this webinar. It's going to be so informative. I just love putting this together for you on Produce Storage 101. So sit back and relax. And thank you for taking the time to invest in learning how to maximize your grocery dollars a little bit more, because produce is expensive. So it's a delight to have you here. But before I begin, let me share just a little bit about myself for those of you that we may not have met in person before. After retiring a restaurant and bakery career, I have been able to harness my passion to assist others in discovering their path between their fork and feet. Now, as an integrative wellness coach, I primarily work with women and men over 50 that are seeking renewal and zest for living longer with improved health and happiness. I also work with small companies, small and medium companies and organizations that understand that health and wellness in the workplace is actually a business strategy. So that's another area that I love to work with, being a retired business owner. Over the course of this presentation, I'm going to share tips on how to stretch your produce budget by improving your produce storage. So grab a pen and paper so that you can take notes. But as I said to some of you earlier on, don't be concerned if you don't grab everything, because there's going to be a lot of conversation here. And that's really what this is intended, is my conversation with you. And then at the end of the presentation, as time allows in your schedule, if you want to hang out in Zoom for a moment and ask me any one-on-one questions, we can do that as well. But I will be sending a follow-up email to you tomorrow that will have the resource links, so at your convenience you can look through them. So today I am your Chief Encouragement Officer and your, hopefully, one of your favorite retired sugar peddlers. Being a wellness advocate, I truly live the life of eating 5 colors a day: red, purple, orange, yellow, and green. If you have your chat box up, why don't you just give me a hey there, I eat this many colors a day as you can, okay? How many of you actually eat 5 colors a day? Well, from my own personal experience, the sheltering in place business and the advent of accessible seasonal fruits and vegetables, I really tend to overbuy in the produce department, and maybe now more than ever, because I'm going to the grocery store, I believe, about every 3 weeks, as opposed to, you know, I'm popping in to get this or I'm popping in to get that. And then I also get produce from a local grower in town, so I buy in bulk. So I have this massive amount of fruits and vegetables around on a regular basis. And it can be difficult, since it's just Chris and I, 2 of us in our household. This may be what you find as well, that you get tempted by the colors and you know the tantalizing tastes that are going to come to your direction, so you just kind of throw it all in your cart. Well, one of my little hacks is that when I go to the grocery store, I make sure that I have all 5 colors in my shopping basket when I leave. And so if you know me well, you know I probably have multiple in every color. Fresh produce can be expensive, and there's nothing more annoying that I find than getting to your fruits and veggies one day too late when they're no longer edible. But you may already have experienced that, and that might be why you signed up for my class today. So over the next hour, we're going to be exploring those tips and tricks that you can use to extend the shelf life of your produce. Now, let's really get started. So I get asked this all the time, you know, where should I store my fruits and vegetables? In the refrigerator or on the counter? Well, what fruits really work well at room temperature? And I'll tell you this, friends, it does depend on the climate in which you live and how you keep your household. If you are a staunch air conditioner user, the humidity in your house will be less than if it's an 85-degree day in central Illinois and 100% humidity. So all of that really influences, you know, how our fruits and vegetables last. So those that are sensitive to cold, that really are best left on the counter, it's a long list. It's those bananas and basil, cucumber, eggplant, garlic, grapefruit, green beans, lemons and limes, oranges, onions, potatoes, all the squashes, and even zucchini and watermelon. So if you've been storing any of those things regularly in your refrigerator, I recommend that you start to keep them on the counter instead. A couple of reasons. One, they're happier on your counter in the room temperature of your kitchen, but they also take up a boatload of space in our refrigerators. And unfortunately, once we close the door to the refrigerator, we can forget about things in the refrigerator. So storing produce that loves to be on the counter is best stored on the counter because it just absolutely reminds you to eat it more regularly. But then there are some produces that really, really love to be in those cool temperatures. And as a general rule, the ones that like to be in there, they have a higher water content. I mean, that would just be your general rule. So if you think of apples and asparagus, blueberries and broccoli, Brussels sprouts, anything from the cabbage family, carrots and cauliflower, cherries and cilantro, corn, all of the dark leafy greens, grapes, leeks, lettuce, parsley, peas, pomegranates, and raspberries and strawberries. I want to go one step back, though, to those leafy greens. There's another component that often we forget to put in the leafy green family. And those are the tops of the carrots and the tops of beet greens and the tops of radishes. So I'll talk about them later, but I want you to keep in mind that when we're talking about leafy greens, it's not just a head of romaine lettuce or greeny leaf kale, okay? Now, just like people, there are fruits and vegetables that like to travel. So just as if we're in the cold weather, we like to travel to the warm weather, but I want you to think of it in reverse, because people don't normally say, I want to travel from warm weather to cold weather, but truthfully, some of our fruits and produce are happier like that. So they get kind of temperamental and they need to be purchased. Well, I don't say they need to be purchased, but we actually end up purchasing most of these things under-ripened in the grocery store. And that would come in those apricots and avocados or kiwi or mangoes. It's rare that we find a fresh, ready-to-eat mango at Kroger or your local grocery store. Same way with melons and nectarines, papaya, peaches, pears, pineapple, and plums. So in this particular category, friends, I'd like you to think about, are you buying most of your fruits and vegetables in your local supermarket produce section, or do you have access to a local grower because seasonally they're grown in your region? That will also, in this particular category, more than ever, influence on how long they may want to stay at the kitchen counter to then go into the cool area. If you're like us in central Illinois, though we can get some Southern Illinois peaches, and yes, we have an Asian pear farm near us, we don't get pineapple and we don't get papaya. So think in this category, the logistics that it takes to get that particular item into your shopping cart to get into your kitchen. If they have to travel a long way, they're being raised for the logistics factor as well. So that it would really give you a clue as to that's one of those fruits and veggies that likes to hang out on the counter. And then you would, after it's ripened, put it in the refrigerator to elongate its shelf life, okay? How's everybody doing? I hope you're doing all right. Since you are on mute, if you have any questions at any time, just go ahead and put a question up in your chat box, okay? Now, fruits and vegetables don't always like to be next to one another. You might have a cousin like that or a relative at a holiday that you prefer not to sit right next to them, but you're happy to see them. Well, that's the same way with some of these fruits and vegetables that can become a little bit of a contentious relationship. So determining whether to store produce in or out of the refrigerator is truly only half the battle. The other factor you have to consider is whether you can store those fruits and vegetables together or if you should separate them. Kind of like, again, a holiday table. Do we keep all the cousins at one table or do we sometimes separate them, right? So as a rule of thumb, now this is just a rule of thumb. Everything has a little nuance here, and it will always depend on how quickly you're eating things. But your rule of thumb is it's better to keep apples, avocados, all of your stone fruits, pears and bananas and tomatoes away from other fruits and vegetables, especially the leafy greens, okay? And that's because of the ethylene gas that these fruits and vegetables release from their skin. And it speeds up the ripening process into really super hyperdrive. So you know those leafy greens are pretty delicate. And if they are around these high gas producers, then that has them really start to ripen too quickly. So if you want here's a list, get your pencil, the gas producers. So what we've gone through in the very front is what likes to be out on the counter, what doesn't, what travels. But now we take this whole other level of the relationship of this beautiful piece of fruit and vegetables. It's a living organism. Keep that in mind. All of our food, they are living organisms that are brought to you to have a great relationship with your healthy body. So these high gas producers are the apples, the avocados, apricots, unripened bananas, the cantaloupe, figs, honeydew, kiwi, nectarines, peaches, plums, and tomatoes. So they are high producers, all right? So if you go to those that are sensitive that you want to keep them away, then that would be ripe bananas, your broccoli, Brussels sprouts, all the cabbage family. Again, your carrots, cauliflower, cucumbers, eggplant, lettuce, peas, peppers, squash, sweet potatoes, and watermelon. And when you take a look at all of those, they all have an interesting compound or substance in them. They're pretty high water, but some of them are also those tougher ones that they have a thinner skin. So think around your squash, for example. Even though that squash is a real solid vegetable, its outer coating, as tough as it still is somewhat thin. Whereas you take many of the other items, they have a lot of liquid in them. So sometimes we are looking to ripen things quicker. So we just said some of our fruits and produce and vegetables produce this ethylene gas more than others. So how can we ripen something quicker? And I have this picture of the avocado on the screen because what? It hasn't happened to you. I know it happens to me a lot. I get the hankering for guacamole, or maybe I want to make some kind of salsa and garnish it with a little bit of avocado. And can I find a ripe one that I can eat in that day or in the next day? Probably not. So here's a little trick that if you are looking for that rock hard avocado to turn into a ripened one just in time for your Taco Tuesday, get a sandwich bag, a paper bag, and put a ripe banana in it. You can also do that same kind of ripening trick with peaches and plums and apricots. So you'll notice those stone fruits. Again, unless you live in an area that those come to you super ripe right away, and you're going to have company or you just really want to make that peach pie and they're a little too hard to peel, Find a ripe banana, and if you don't have one on your counter, the odds are, especially right now, you can find them at the grocery store and buy some that are a little bit riper. So just how does ethylene work? Okay, ethylene is this plant hormone that I just alluded to, and it's an aging hormone for plants of all kind. So keep in mind, just as you see on this picture of the screen of this mango, as that gas starts to produce, it starts to ripen everything. And I don't know about you, but we're getting such a hurry that we buy our food and take it home. How often do you really take a look at that food and say, I want to have a relationship with you, right? This food is, you are bringing it into your home so that it nourishes your physical body, and taking the time to make sure we're bringing those 5 colors into our kitchen each and every day for our meals. And then to have that relationship with it, it's more than just sitting down to eat it, is to honor the lifespan of that fruit and produce so that it is nourishing you the best they can be. You know, a silly little fun fact, you know, talking about gas and aging things. Nearly 100 years ago even, researchers noticed that trees that were next to those gas street lamps, those leaves started wilting, not because of the heat from it, but because of the gas coming off of it. And it was aging the leaves on the trees too quick. Just one of those little, you know, you go to trivia night, there's a little fun fact for you. How y'all doing? Onions. Oh my, yes. I get asked about onions a lot. How do I store them best? Well, I'm going to use onions in this one, and then I'll talk about it again in potatoes. Onions really are best if they're in a dry, dark space. But here's the other thing about that, because if you're like me, or if you have a cupboard, I have a pantry in my entryway. And on one shelf of that, I use for that dark storage, that I put onions and I put squash and those types of things in there, and potatoes. Well, we don't want the onions to be, again, a kissing cousin to the potatoes or a squash or a watermelon. And that's because in that space, the onion odor and flavor will definitely seep into those other items that you have in the cupboard. Now, depending what you're making with the onions, maybe you're making an au gratin, or maybe the onion would be an enhancer. Well, then don't worry about it. You know how you're going to be cooking those ingredients. But say you've got a watermelon in there, or maybe it's the time you're buying your squash and you're going to store them in there over the winter. We really don't want them to be absorbing all of that onion flavor. So also with potatoes, onions and potatoes, though they cook super well together, if onions are really right against the potatoes, it will cause those potatoes to sprout quicker and age quicker, okay? And that is just not something, and all depends on how you're cooking, but just keep that in mind. Again, not knowing how many you have in your households, using my own personal experience, it's my husband and I. And so I do buy a bag, like a 10-pound bag of fresh organic sweet potatoes, and I store them on that shelf. Well, I also buy, literally every time I go to the grocery store, I buy a sweet onion, a red onion, and a white onion, because I know that through the course of time, each one of those onions gives me a little bit of different flavor enhancement. But I know that that big bag of potatoes is going to be in there for a long time. So as I'm rotating out those onions, I'm bringing even stronger onions in there. I don't really want them to be touching my sweet potatoes, or if I have white potatoes in there, to have them go poorly quicker. Now this is great. I love scallions, or green onions. And one of the reasons I really enjoy them is that they're cheap. And you can, at the grocery store, so often it's 2 or 3 bundles and you can use the whole thing, right? Well, one of the challenges, if you're going to the grocery store every 3 weeks and you're buying scallions and you're not using them up every day, they can get pretty slimy and dry out then quickly if they get stored incorrectly. So the next time you bring home those scallions from the store, I suggest that you actually place them in a glass of water of just about an inch or two. And you're going to find out throughout the presentation, I often have multiple bouquets of fresh produce in my refrigerator. I make space for that. One, it's fun to open the door and see them sitting there in that little pool of water. But in this particular case, one of the reasons the scallions get really slimy is that green part has a lot of water in it, and then doggone it, our grocery stores mist them all day long. And then we put them in a plastic bag to bring them home. So if we're leaving them in that plastic bag, it just encourages them to get slimy. So we want to get them out of that. And then we want to put the white tips in a little bit of water. And then so that you don't have a lot of oxygen around that, go ahead and place either a Ziploc bag, or I just use the produce bag that I brought them home in from the store, and I drape that loosely over the top of the green part. And then that helps the oxygen stay away from them. It also helps the odor of them of permeating too much through the refrigerator. But here's another fun thing, and if you've got grandkids or kids at home, or you just want a science experiment, I think this is super fun. You know, when you bring those scallions home and at the end of the white part, there are those little roots. Well, I encourage you to take 2 or 3 of those and go ahead and eat the green part off the top, but save the little white part and get another small cup of water and just put those roots down there and set it out on the kitchen counter. And before you know it, guys, you're gonna see some green sprouts to come up, and you can actually easily grow your next bunch of scallions right there on your counter for free after what you brought home from the grocery store. It's just kind of entertaining. You know, you gotta have fun with your food all the time. Apples you see here on the screen, once we slice some of our fruits, they age really, really quickly. And so when you get into apples in particular, or even bananas or pears or avocados, those fruits, they don't last long once we cut them open, because the oxygen just starts to age the outer flesh of that. So if you are prepping something ahead of time, then you can just go ahead and put them in a bowl of cold water with a little bit of lemon juice and then drain it off. And frankly, I honestly don't even mess with the water typically. For example, a couple days a week, especially right now, Chris has been asking to take his lunch to work, and I know he could make it himself, but you know, I just like to do that for him. And I frequently will send an apple. And so what I do is, in that little Tupperware container, slice up my apple, and I'll just put a little squeeze if I have a fresh lemon, or a little drizzle of lemon juice on it. But then I'll go one step further because it's a snack. I'll sprinkle cinnamon on top of that and shake it up in the little container. I mean, it's just a touch of both, so that then when they get eaten, and I do this for myself when I have a snack, that cinnamon, one, it helps balance our blood sugar, and you're eating sugar with your apple. So it's a nice balancer, but it's also a nice mental stimulation. So just think about it. You're eating a delicious, juicy apple. You got a sprinkle of cinnamon on it. It's kind of like a dessert treat, super healthy, and it tricks the mind, keeps you away from that Snicker bar. Avocados, though, I got to tell you, I have a hard time remembering. Even I have a hard time remembering an avocado is actually a fruit. I think it's because it's green, and so I just kind of lose sight that it really is a fruit. Once we open that avocado, those enzymes will turn brown right away because the oxygen just kisses right up to it right away. So a couple of things on using avocados, and again, this really depends on how you're going to use the avocado and how many live in your household. So avocados, super healthy. I just did a Toolbox Tuesday a few weeks ago on avocado. You might have seen that recipe on the chocolate avocado pudding. If you haven't tried that recipe yet, it is super, super delicious and super easy. But you might not want to eat the entire avocado. So you can, again, you can put a little bit of lemon juice on that, and I will go ahead and just take a piece of film over it, and I save the half that has the pit in it. In our household, avocado doesn't last very long. We will eat either one in an entire day or at the most 2 days. So it really depends on how you're going to cook with them. But you can also take an onion. They are compatible with the avocado to help them stay, keeping them not going brown. But I caution you, I would not put an onion in the bag or in the wrap with an avocado if I'm going to make that delicious chocolate pudding. But I would use the onion approach if it is something that I'm going to make guacamole, or I'm going to use it as a garnish. Another thing about the avocado is it is so dense that it won't absorb water. So another trick, and I like to do this if I'm prepping ahead for a dinner party in particular, that I'm going to use some chopped avocados, say as a garnish on top of some grilled fish, maybe with some mango and some chopped cilantro, is to go ahead and unpack that avocado. So open it up. And what I like to do is take my knife and just make slits down the end and then crosswise and squeeze it lightly so these little chunks just plop right down into a bowl. And I'll go ahead and cover it with water, no lemon or anything. I just cover it with water. So the water is a complete sealant around that avocado. And because of the density of the avocado, it doesn't absorb any of that water. So then you just drain the water off, pat the avocado dry with a paper towel, boomtown, you're ready to go and use it that night. Leafy greens, I told you I would be coming back to leafy greens. I love, love, love greens. I love them cold, I love them sauteed. But the thing is, now if you're going to the grocery store every 3 weeks, greens can go bad pretty darn quick. So here are a couple of tips. If it's wilting too quickly on you, the best thing, the most important thing to keep in mind is to keep those leaves dry, okay? So the best method for washing and storing these leafy greens is to separate the leaves from the head and soak them in some cool water for about 5 minutes. And then gently swirl the leaves in the water and put them in a salad spinner. Now, if you guys don't have a salad spinner, one, I would encourage you to go out and pick one up. It will lengthen the life of your greens remarkably. But if you don't want that and you don't have one, then go ahead and just plug your kitchen sink, let them soak in some cold water, shake them out, and then just lay some paper towels on the inside of a bowl so that they can just stay open like that, okay? And we don't want to store them wet. So you really want to shake them really good so that they really get all that water off. Otherwise, they're going to turn mushy on you really quickly. But the salad spinner will keep those greens in there for really a long time. But this is where I want you to take that salad spinner idea or your bowl with a paper towel a little bit further. And remember the carrot tops, remember the beet tops, remember the radish tops. All of those have delightful flavors that really enhance your spinach, your kale, your spring greens mix. But one more thing that I like to put in my salad spinner with my leafy greens is I will go ahead and cruise my herb garden. We'll talk about herbs here in a little bit, but I'll throw a couple of different herbs into that salad spinner so that then when I tear it up for my salad, I've already put some extra flavor in there that is just really lively and a lot of fun. Give it a try. Berries, I am a big berry advocate. I actually got out this morning and picked my first bowl of wild black raspberries while Maddie and I were out on the trail. And so berries are delicate and they just hate to be abused, okay? They're so delicate. So one of the best ways to clean them, I think, is to take a bowl of water, put cold water in there, add a little bit of white vinegar. The white vinegar will not flavor them at all. You won't taste it, but it'll help clean them. Let them swim around for a little bit, then drain them off and lay them out on a plate or a tray that's got a couple of paper towels on them. And then keep them in the strainer, or, you know, a microwave steamer works. Any kind of storage vessel that has air to filter through them. That is your key on keeping berries fresher longer. If you're putting them in a Ziploc bag, they're going to get crabby. They're going to really get crabby in there. They don't like to have the moisture trapped around them. It makes them wilt faster. And trust me, berries are one of the places we get so much of our antioxidants, but we also get the mental stimulation from their beautiful colors they bring us, and then the pop in our mouth. So give them the respect and let them have some airflow. It's one of the reasons why your clamshells, you know, when you get it at the grocery store, have those little air vents in it. You might not have known that, but that's why. Produce to keep in the pantry. The general rule is to never refrigerate those potatoes, onions, and squash or garlic. We've talked about that a little bit. And this is the reason. The cold temperatures change the texture and flavor of your food. And though I agree with my statement, I will tell you guys, it's not always one way or the other way. Again, going back to how many people are in your household. Are you buying big bags of onions and potatoes? Are you buying 12 squash for the winter? They'll stay fine in your pantry, those squash will. But the potatoes, like with Chris and I, or an onion, sometimes I might forget one that's in the back of the cupboard. Or maybe they've started to just, I forgot I had bought those potatoes for a dinner party and I never got back to them. And they're starting to get a little soft, or they're going to start to sprout. I will put those back in the refrigerator so I slow it all down. You just have to recognize, especially with your potatoes, when they start to get really cold, and if you get them cold right from the get-go, it means the sugar is going to come up in them faster, and that's going to make them age faster, and they will be a little bit tougher in texture. Should you find that in your pantry you do have some potatoes that's happened, then decide how you're going to cook them. Cook them differently. It might not be something that you're putting a sturdy potato in an au gratin or something, but maybe you're going to roast them with some other root vegetables that combine those flavors. Be inventive on how you use them. Don't throw them away though. And tomatoes, storing tomatoes in the fridge, again, they stay on the kitchen counter all the time unless they're starting to get a little soft. That's when I will put them in the refrigerator, just to give me another 48 hours to come up with something to do with them, okay? How many of you are properly using your veggie crisper drawers? Depending on your age of your refrigerator, you may have humidity controls in there and you may not. I can tell you, I have 2 crisper drawers, but the age of my own refrigerator, I don't have great humidity control. So, but crisper drawers in your refrigerator, if you have the humidity levels, then that can help you optimize the freshness. So you're going to need, after this webinar, to go back to your refrigerator, find out, what is my refrigerator like? Now, these drawers, yeah, it's a great place to, when you buy extra stuff, even beer, to throw in the crisper drawers. But my suggestion is that you, again, learn how to buy more fruits and vegetables at one time, and then be able to really maximize the use of your drawers, okay, to keep everything fresh longer. So if you have this ability in your refrigerator, here's a case for you to consider. I want you to store thin Skinner or those leafy vegetables, your fresh herbs and greens that are prone to wilting, You put them in your high humidity drawer, okay? Because they need that humidity. But then your high ethylene producing fruits should be stored in the low humidity, right? Because we want in the low humidity, that drawer has an open vent in it that helps the gases escape. And so that helps keep that. Now, if you don't have those humidity controls, then go back to that list of trying to keep things separated by that ethylene gas production. And don't worry, I'm going to send you a list in your email that has those categories in it if you weren't able to take that note, don't worry. Okay, produce, and it's about ready to go bad. It happens to all of us. And the easy answer is to throw it away. Well, kids, I don't want you to throw it away. Number one, you spent money on it, so that's like putting money in the garbage. So that's not good. It adds to the waste stream. Food that goes in the waste stream is super heavy. We don't want to do that either. So we need to figure out ways to go about it. So we're coming off of strawberry season. I just bought 8 quarts of strawberries earlier this week that some of them were starting to look a little bit, by the time I got to stemming them, because I was putting them in the freezer, they were starting to look a little bit sad. So instead of me throwing them away, I made a strawberry compote with some honey and cornstarch. And then I buy plain yogurt. I'll use that as a topping on my yogurt, okay? So finding ways to use that produce instead of throwing it away is where you go. Mangoes oftentimes can go from not edible to super edible right away, and you don't get to it. Same way with bananas. Instead of just letting them go completely brown, if you're going to be out of town or whatever, throw them in the freezer. Chop them up and throw them in the freezer. And then go ahead and pull those ripe bananas out at a later date to make your banana bread, or maybe a banana oatmeal chocolate chip cookie, whatever the case may be. So some foods freeze really well and some don't. And that also, I'm going to send you a link that will help you understand how you can really maximize that freezer as a working partner, as a location to house for a later time that produce that is about ready to go bad, so you don't throw it away. Herbs. Herbs, this is a great time, at least here in Central Illinois. You might have a pot on your patio. I have tons in my garden. And what do you do with them? Well, basil is really the only one that really doesn't like cold weather. So basil likes to sit out on the counter, again, as a vase. Cut a big stem of it, put it in a little bit of water, let it hang out on the counter, okay? Fresh herbs do like to be stored in the refrigerator, with the exception of basil, in just a very damp paper towel. And I mean damp, just lightly damp. I'll just put a dribble of water on it. But that paper towel helps you absorb the moisture that's coming out of those herbs. And a couple of things here, gang. If you've got a lot of herbs going on in your yard and you bring a lot of them in the house, but you can't use them all right away, what I like to do is I make little bouquets out of them. Yeah, so for example, maybe take some, like you see in this picture, bundle it with a little kitchen string with your sage, rosemary, maybe some thyme, oregano, even basil if you want. And then what I do is I take those little bouquets and I throw them in a Ziploc bag or a freezer container for in the winter, because they're going to freeze whole in there, not a problem. And then you are maximizing the produce or the productivity of your herb plant, so it'll continue to regenerate. Because what happens, a lot of times start to bloom and go to seeds, we need to keep our herbs trimmed. And so looking ahead to the winter months, you can take those bouquets out, toss it into a pot of soup, and then you already have stuff that came out of your garden. It's super great, super, super great. The other way I save herbs real quick is you can either hang them. I've taken a coat hanger and taken those bundles and hang them on a coat hanger down in my laundry room. Or I also use the microwave to slowly dry my herbs. And then I de-stem them and keep them in mason jars. So if you come to my house at the end of the season, you're going to find a big section in that pantry that is all mason jars that has herbs for the winter. Celery, I got asked about this by somebody that's on the call actually about celery. And celery is a fun thing, and you might not think about it, but one of the things that to help keep celery from getting rubbery is to wrap it in aluminum foil. If you bring this whole head of celery home, take it out of that plastic bag and go ahead and just wrap it up in aluminum foil, and it'll stay crisp for a super, super long time. And that foil, it lets the ethylene gas that it's creating escape, but it also will keep the celery crisp. Whereas if you kept it in that plastic bag, then that ethylene gas is going to have it age and it will start to brown and get rubbery. But I don't even do that. I rarely do that. I bring my celery home and I use the entire stalk. So if you are cutting off the heel and cutting off the leaves and putting those in your waste stream right away, I do ask you, my friend, to stop doing that, okay? Cut them off and set them over to the side, and then go ahead and cut your strips of celery and put them in a bowl of water. Similarly, you know, like carrots. I live with a guy that if I have a bowl of cut up vegetables in the refrigerator, they're gonna get eaten. If they're not cut up, I'm going to tell you, he doesn't cut them up himself. Yeah, he's a pretty spoiled guy. My guess is others on the call have some spoiled people they live with as well. So once you've taken what you're going to eat and put it in the refrigerator in water, now you have this heel of celery and all the leaves. I want you to put those either into a big freezer container or Ziploc bag if you're using that. And please reuse your Ziploc bags more than once and just toss it in the freezer. It's going to be the same thing as your herbs. Every heel that I cut off, it stays in that freezer, okay? Because you're going to make a vegetable stock out of it later if you wondered. All right, so grab those paper towels. You have heard me mention multiple times now on the use of paper towels. So we use paper towels frequently, either to line a plastic bag, leaving it open with leafy produce in it and herbs. But you can also do that if you are buying a lot of green beans or snap peas or snow peas, and those peas are in season here in Central Illinois right now. That if you just lay them on a paper towel and then put them in an open, again, a Ziploc bag, or we get so many produce bags from the grocery store, just reuse one of those. Just don't knot it. But here's the other thing I ask that you consider to do with your paper towels. It's not a one and done, friends. We're putting things that are clean on top of them, and they're doing a job for us, but they have multiple jobs that can be had. So when I take my paper towels out of my crisper drawer and I'm going to use, we'll say, those pea pods tonight, I'm just going to take that paper towel and fold it, and I have down in my drawer, you might have one in your kitchen as well, where you keep all of your foil, your wax paper, your film and whatnot. And just take a little corner there and take those paper towels and tuck them in the corner. So the next time you go to the store and you bring these foods home that you're going to use a paper towel, you can reuse that because it really isn't dirty. So I encourage you again to get multiple lives and uses out of all of your paper towels. Mushrooms. Oh my gosh, such a healthy vegetable for us to have. We should be eating mushrooms all the time. But here's one of the things, mushrooms go bad really quickly. One, depending on the size of carton, depending what meal you bought it for, what recipe, the odds of you using an entire carton of mushrooms at one time is slim and none, in my opinion. And oftentimes, most of the time I should say, our mushrooms come to us in plastic. Plastic and mushrooms, they do not get along. First thing, when you go to the grocery store, friends, if you have the opportunity to buy mushrooms that are in a cardboard carton as opposed to a plastic carton, I encourage you first and foremost, don't shop by price, shop by packaging in this particular case. Again, depending where the logistics are bringing those mushrooms from, we don't know how long the mushrooms have been in any of the cartons. If it's in plastic, they just get slimy and moldy quicker. That plastic traps the moisture in, and considering mushrooms are a fungus, they like to get moldy. The plastic encourages that to happen a lot quicker. So if you only can buy mushrooms and they're in a plastic container, then I encourage you to bring them home. And again, lay them on one of your vegetable paper towels, or you can again use a brown paper like sandwich sack if you have some of those at home, and put them in there. Definitely if they're in a cardboard carton, they're going to be okay, but take the plastic wrapping completely off of them and even maybe crack open those edges, and they'll last a lot longer for you. Oh, and then we have our water lovers. And let me just, before I talk about actually the orange carrot, because carrots are so good for our eyes, take a look at those greens. If you are able to buy carrots that have tops on them, please do, because those tops have so much potential you might not already be knowing about. So a couple of things I love to do with carrot tops. I make carrot pesto. Just like you make basil pesto, the carrot pesto is a little bit not as pungent as a basil pesto. It's smooth. It makes a great appetizer on some crostini. It also is really good to put on naan, or if you're making like a margarita pizza, swap out some of a basil pesto on that and go ahead and put a carrot one. It's just a nice delicate. I love to put them in my salads, as I said earlier, and I also really love to saute them with beet greens. I am a beet green lover. They are the sweetest, and so if you're making a stir fry, these are greens that should not go in the waste stream. They should all be eaten. But carrots and also asparagus tend to dry out a little quickly. And so they like to have a little bit of water. So when, again, just like your celery, I recommend that you go ahead and prep your carrots however you want. Personally, I choose not to take the skin off my carrots. I think that that additional fiber and nutrient content is good for my digestive tract. It doesn't bother me at all. If there are little hairs like you see on these particular carrots, just take a little vegetable scrub and scrub them on off, and then either slice them in discs or in strips. But just as with your celery, my friends, keep the tops and keep the very tip. So on the end of that orange carrot, I'm going to throw those in my freezer bag as well. Same way with the end of my onions. And once that freezer bag of all my vegetable scraps is done, they're going to go in a crock pot with some herbs for about 14 to 16 hours to make a vegetable broth, and then freeze that in mason jars over the winter. Asparagus, we are fortunate most of the time anymore to get this year round, or we have been. We're past our asparagus season here in Central Illinois. So especially when you're buying it in the grocery store, bring that little baby home, cut about a ½ inch, and set yourself up again for a nice bouquet in your refrigerator, and it will stay healthy long term. So as I said, this is drawing me to the end of my comments with you today. And I put together a resource page that I will send to you in my notes tomorrow. And it's going to be a really long laundry list of some websites that you can just peruse at your own encouragement to learn more about how you can adapt your kitchen style to bring in the best of produce, fruits and vegetables, seasonal and non-seasonal, but then how can you make that into a lifestyle year-long, okay? That's one of my goals as an integrative strategist, is to provide those of you that join me on these webinars or on my newsletter with more resources. I want you to feel empowered to live the healthiest life you possibly can long term. So thank you so very much for taking time out of your busy day to join me on this webinar. I absolutely loved getting to share with you, and I hope that you learned something valuable about produce storage. I also want to add how proud I am of each of you for taking steps towards being more responsible with your food waste habits. You know, if you're not composting, please start, or maybe look into your local area. Is there a place that is community composting? If you are in Peoria, Sous Chef actually has a community composting drop-off site. Or maybe you have a neighbor that already is doing that. So you could say, hey, you want some of my produce as well. If you have any further questions on this or anything around a healthy lifestyle, please feel free to get a hold of me. So look for your email follow-up in tomorrow's inbox. Reach out to me with any questions. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for following my efforts to improve societal health. As this is a free webinar, I do have an ask from you. If you know of someone that is over the age of 50 and is looking for renewed zest and purpose and passion in their life, and they may be interested in having a conversation with an integrative strategist, please feel free to pass my information along. I do a free 30-minute strategy session with everyone. If you know others that would like to join the family on Toolbox Tuesday, pass along the copy that you get. Invite them, and they can click on my website for some free resources, and just by going through the Contact Mary button, that will get them put on that list. In the meantime, I hope that you have an absolutely fantastic day, and